Let's bring in Brett Tolman. We're very pleased to have Counselor Tolman. He's a former U.S. attorney for the District of Utah, and he knows what he's doing. All right, he's dealt with this kind of stuff before. And you don't have any ideological bent here, right? I mean, you're just a crime fighter, or you were. Now you're a private attorney. But you're not involved with any Republican or Democratic Party stuff, are you?
No, none. And in fact, this is now beyond politics.
Thank you. Thank you. I've been banging this drum for a week. That is not a political story anymore. Okay.
It's not a political story.
So how difficult is it to bring criminal charges against federal investigative officials if indeed it pans out they knew the information they took to the FISA judge was bogus?
Well, let's look at this, because you're absolutely right. There may be criminal issues here in this case. The FISA court itself has a rule that you have to make the judge aware of information that may invalidate the basis for a search warrant. That's articulated in the court, and it's very different than your federal courts that you're getting a search warrant on a drug case. In addition to that, you have perjury issues. If you're put under oath, when you swear to or attest to the information you're giving to the judge, you may have perjury issues. You also may have what's referred to as a 1001 prosecution potential, and that is, are you knowingly giving false information to a federal official? And if you are, there's a specific statute that governs that. And then on top of that, Bill, if it is knowingly, and you stated it correctly, we want to know what they knew and when did they know it. If it's knowingly, you cannot argue that obstruction of justice prosecution should apply in some instances and not also argue then that it wouldn't apply here. And that may be the more difficult hurdle for those that would be accused of knowingly giving the false information to a FISA judge.
Now, the FISA court was set up solely to protect the United States from terror activity. It's a totally different thing than you mentioned the drug court or anything like that. James Comey did two things that startled me. The first thing he did was he came out and said that the dossier the FBI used, at least partially, to convince a judge to write the warrant against Carter Page, Comey admitted that it was unsubstantiated. He publicly admitted that. Yet he put his name on paperwork that was submitted to the judge to get the wire, basically partially based on his dossier. The second thing that stunned me was after the memo from the Republicans on the House Intelligence Committee came out, Comey tweeted, "Is that it?" I thought that was pretty arrogant of him to do. I went, maybe you should be a little bit more concerned here, former Director Comey. What were your take on it?
Well, the FBI has had a long history of prosecuting corruption. And now the allegations are turned, and it's facing them. And the question becomes, did the Steele dossier constitute the most important part of what was presented to this judge, this FISA judge? Apparently, it is the first thing that is presented to the FISA judge. And having worked in the United States Senate, I had top secret clearance. I worked on some of the rulemaking for the FISA court. And the process is supposed to be like this. Several days before they're going to approach the judge, they're going to give them a packet of all the wiretaps they want. And in that packet is supposed to be the critical information. It can't be anonymous sources, and it's supposed to be vetted information. That judge then takes that packet and reviews it days in advance. And that's very different than a federal court when it, last minute talks to an agent and is talking to them to get a drug search warrant. This is several days in which that FISA court judge can sit and review and outline the types of questions that need to be asked of these agents. Now, I've been asked before, is it possible that the director doesn't know what's being presented to the FISA court judge? I will tell you why that's so hard to believe. The rulemaking behind the FISA court expressly indicated that the director and the deputy director are the only authorities that can govern the FISA court authority that they seek to obtain. Now, it can be delegated, but it's very limited on that. So it's very hard to believe that it doesn't go all the way up to the top.
That's why I say that when an Andrew McCabe, the deputy director of the FBI, says to the Senate Intel Committee, we would never have gotten this wire on Carter Page had we not used the dossier. And then Comey, his boss, says, we know the dossier is unverified. I put those two statements together and I go, there's got to be a crime here. Maybe maybe they were just the gang that couldn't shoot straight, but it's hard to believe a guy like Comey and McCabe, these guys, would be that stupid.
It is incredibly damaging to acknowledge that they would not have gotten the Steele dossier or gotten the warrant without the Steele dossier.